What is up, gamers? In this video I wanted to talk about all the different sword skills and review them. Are they good? Are they bad? What are they good for? So it's gonna be a sword guide covering all of the skills. Alright, so let's start with Morning Moon. Probably the first skill you will unlock on your journey. This skill is pretty basic, there's not much to say about it, other than it can be used when you're out of key. So let me deplete my key. And as you can see, I can deplete my key with the final attack and then I can still use Morning Moon. So it's a good combo extender, and you can use it to keep pressure on an enemy if you know you're gonna execute them with it, or maybe keep hitting a boss while you're out of key. So yeah, it's pretty good for that. So the second skill, Sword of Meditation. So Sword of Meditation looks like this. You charge it up, walk towards your enemy, and discharge a high slashing attack. This attack hits really hard, and you also have super armor while casting it. Because the cast time is so long, you will probably not find much use for this attack, other than ambushing enemies from behind if they're not suspecting you. So if this guy was unaware of my presence and I approached him with this, he would probably get one shot. Let's go. Sword of Meditation, big play. But other than that, there isn't much use for it. If you can pull it off, then it's the hardest hitting sword skill, but it's hard to make a use of it. Also, there's a lot of lag at the end of the animation. So as you can hear, I'm spamming buttons and I can't move for a solid 2 seconds. So it's very useful to cancel out of it with a yokai ability or the burst counter. And yeah, so that is it for the Sword of Meditation. Hard hitting but very slow and risky. Alright, so now let's talk about the parries. So sword has got 3 parries, or technically 4. So there's Leaf Glide, there's Haze, and there's Water Shadow. So Leaf Glide and Haze are on the guard plus light attack. Leaf Glide gives you a small damage bonus after you execute it correctly. Alright, and we got the damage bonus, which is pretty long, so if you can keep using Leaf Glides, you can probably keep it up throughout the level without much problem. There's also Haze, and the final parry is Water Shadow. And it looks like this. So which parries are the best? Water Shadow deals a little bit more damage than Haze, but there isn't much difference between them. Leaf Glide can be used to keep up this damage bonus throughout the level. Other than that, it doesn't deal any damage by itself. And yeah, so those are the 3 parries. You can really use either one. But the strongest parry of the sword is the timely guard parry called Backwave. So Backwave is the strongest parry of the sword by far, because it is the safest. So if I press it too early, I'm just gonna get a guard, and if I press it on the right timing, then it's gonna bounce back. And what is so good about this parry is that you can key pulse after it. So some weapons, like for example Tonfa's parry, cannot key pulse, but sword can. So after using Backwave, I can key pulse and then use some ability, or use an attack, switch stance. You know, let's say I go to high stance and start attacking. You know, whatever that is. But you have all the options available after using Backwave. So that's really the only parry you need, and it's very strong. At the end of Backwave, you can also use Backwave 2, which knocks the enemy to the ground. If you press the button once again, it deals a little bit of damage, less than the Haze and Water Shadow. In my experience, not that useful, since you can keep pulse the Backwave and then start attacking with some skill, which is probably better, or just attacking in high stance. But it's also an option. and it doesn't cost any key, so you can cast it out of key also. So that's one thing that's going for it. And alright, so those are the parries, and let's move on to the kick. So kick is an amazing ability. It is the best option for the sword to deal key damage quickly. So the way it works is in mid or low stance, after light attack you perform a kick, or after series of attacks you can finish them off with a kick. It's really pretty good, especially against yokai enemies, where you need to remain evasive. As you can see, he takes quite a bit of key damage from that. And yeah, for yokai enemies this is really the best option. I'm a huge fan of the kick myself. I even use key damage on my weapon as a perk, so yeah, kick is really good. So don't sleep on it. It's nothing too exciting, but you know, solid key damage. Let's demonstrate on Aoki. You know, after, you know, 4 kicks or so, he's out of key, so. And then you can just finish him off with whatever attack you find necessary. Alright, I don't have my visual setup here. Let's finish him off. Alright. So that is kick. Kick is super good for bosses or yokai enemies. Really good, solid damage. A very solid key damage option. We'll look at those skills later. Actually, let's look at them right now. So there are 2 mystic arts for the sword. One is Sword of Salvation and the other one is Sword of Execution. Sword of Execution increases damage dealt from behind, or if enemies are in a down state, so if they're vulnerable to a finishing blow. So finishing blow damage and damage from the back. It's 20% increase. It's the best art to play on the sword. And alright, and what does the second one do? So the second one reduces key consumption when dodging. From my testing it was also 20%. So 20% less key consumption on the dodge and extended window of opportunity for a successful timely guard. So it's easier to hit backwaves with it. Backwave timing is not that hard in my opinion, and it's also quite safe. Even if you mess it up, you're just gonna get a guard. So I would use Sword of Execution most of the time. Against some faster enemies, definitely playing this for the backwave or for the key consumption while dodging. If you know you cannot hit the backside is good, but most of the time Sword of Execution is the way to go. It transforms the sword from a decent DPS weapon to a really good DPS weapon. So those are the mystic arts. And let's move forward towards the next skill, which is Heaven Flash. Oh, Heaven Flash. Heaven Flash is possibly the single best sword skill in its kit by itself. Alright, obviously there's a lot of variety, but if there was just one skill, this could be the best one. So why is it so good? I feel like it's easy to overlook it. So you can use it standing right next to the enemy. It's extremely spammable, as you can see. So yeah, it's extremely spammable, it's extremely strong. But as a matter of fact, you don't have to use it right next to the enemy. So the way it works is you do a light attack and then you do a dodge. And if you collide with an enemy during your dodge, then it will transform into a Heaven Flash. So you kinda like make a kick, leap into the air. During your leaping animation, they cannot hit you, so they're staggered during that animation. And then bang. It's decent damage. The leaping thing deals a bit of key damage, so it's also alright for key damage. You actually have iframes, so you can dodge like ground attacks, like for example Yatsu no Kami grab, you can dodge with this if you're in the air. So if you time it properly, you can dodge attacks with this. It's super spammable, it's super good, and it's the best gap closer. It's also great setup skill, so if I use this Heaven Flash, then I can, for example, let's say I use Heaven Flash, then I wanna switch to high stance and do something, whatever. Then while I'm in the air, I have the time to kind of think what stance I want to end up in, right? So I start in low stance, go to mid stance, and then do something, or I go to high stance and do something. But it gives me time to think because the enemy is staggered. Really good skill, super spammable, super strong. Heaven Flash is amazing. And what it collides with is the Swift Step. Swift Step is another really strong skill. Right here. Swift Step. So the way Swift Step works is that's it. It's just a dash. You can use it without hitting an enemy. You get iframes during this animation while you're you have this white kind of after image. So during that you have iframes. You move behind the enemy. Super good against bosses. But the strongest thing about it is the fact that you can keep attacking. So let's demonstrate it maybe here. So let's say I wanted to hit this Yoki with some light attacks. I can hit him with a bunch of attacks and then I need to dodge to the side, right? But if I use Flowing Shadow, then I can keep attacking. And when he starts his attack animation, that's when I just use it, right? So it allows you to play much more aggressive with your light attacks. And when the enemy's attack is about to connect, then you just do the Flowing Shadow, right? Or Swift Step, sorry, it's called Swift Step. So this is really good for bosses, and in many boss fights it allows you to get this one more attack in to, for example, apply Purity or something. So in many boss fights you're able to do like 3 attacks, but you could do 4 if you do a Swift Step at the end, and it makes a lot of difference. Super good for evasive play, which is a strength of the sword. So for evading attacks and kind of staying behind the enemy, can set up for the sort of execution also. It's really, really good. So both of those skills are super good in the slot, and both have their uses. Alright, so the next one, Blue Moon. Blue Moon you can unlock kinda late in the game. It's kinda easy to overlook it, I feel like, but it definitely has got its uses. So Blue Moon starts like this, gives you a nice damage buff, which doesn't stack with anything else, so you can freely use it. You can stack it, it doesn't overwrite anything else. And then you can release it. You can wait for the full buff and release it, or just release it early. It's 4 slashes. It's pretty good damage. I would say it's a little bit behind Night Rain from my experience. But the strength of this move is that it moves you forward. So if the enemy is backstepping or like being very evasive, you can usually catch them with this, even if you don't get all the hits. It's also really good for horn breaks. So as you can see, I can just freely cast it, and the 3rd or the 4th hit, all of them are pretty high, and the Yoki will get his horn taken from him. And yeah, it's a damage skill. There's not really that much to say about it other than that. Good damage, some chase potential. You wanna be close to the enemy to hit all 4 of those, but a Night Rain would not reach some of the enemies, which this will reach with more forward momentum. Alright, so it's pretty good. It's nothing like crazy. It's one of the better damage skills. Probably a little bit behind Night Rain still, but it's pretty good. So the next skill. So Shadow Sword. Finish off a strong attack by striking the enemy with a scabbard. This one can be used from any stance. So looks like this. And yeah, just like the Half Blue Moon, I think it's called, or Half Moon, you can also use this attack when out of key. So I deplete my key completely and I can still use it, so that's a pretty good thing. And yeah, is it good? So this is the sword's another key damage option. It's not that good by itself because the animation is pretty long, even from low stance. It's probably best used in mid stance against human enemies after this thrust attack from mid stance because it's pretty good. And then you can follow it up with Light in Darkness. So at the end of this, do a strong attack once again, and it ends like that. It's a pretty good combo for key damage as well as damage. So it kinda does both. It's not really a master of any, but like kinda jack of all trades. It's a pretty good move. I like to start it mostly from high stance against enemies. It's a pretty good move for break. So the reason it's high stance and not mid stance for me is because, let's say, if this guy was blocking, so as you can see, I hit him with the strong attack, but I cannot keep comboing if my attack bounces off of his guard. It will be the same in mid stance. But in high stance, there is no such restriction. So even if he's guarding in high stance, if I start like this, then I can always follow it up. So for that reason, I like doing it from high stance, because my attack will not bounce off of his guard. You know, definitely it's the fastest from low stance, and it's probably the most effective from mid stance against human enemies. So that's kind of how it works on him. Bang, bang, bang. Decent damage, decent key damage, decent break also. At some point it's probably the best option for damage and key damage that you have somewhere like mid game, but in late game this gets overshadowed by the other options that you have. But nonetheless, it's a pretty good skill. It's definitely worth investing in. Oh yeah, and one more thing I would say about it is that this is not exactly a true combo. So some bosses will actually dodge out of it. So after the scabbard hits, some bosses can start their animation with super armor or dodge away. So be careful. But for most normal enemies, this is pretty good and it's guaranteed combo. In most cases, but not always. Not always with bosses, alright. But a pretty good skill nonetheless. And the next one is Sword of Discernment. Sword of Discernment is really good. It's really good. You might think it's not very good. Very easy to overlook. So what is it good for? It's not really good for fighting yokai. But the thing going for the skill is it's the fastest sword skill that you have available. So it comes out the fastest. It's the best interrupt move. So, you know, he starts his attack, but I want to hit him first. Then use this always. It's quite spammable. Some enemies will just break if you do this. If you just keep spamming, or you can force them into a block state. You can knock enemies down. The second hit hits down the enemies. It's really good as a mix-up, right? It's not the most powerful skill by itself for damage. It's not the most powerful skill for key damage, but the interrupt is really good. And also important thing, just like with the previous attack, if you use it, you will not bounce off the enemy guard. So it's a guaranteed cast, and you know, even if he's guarding, I can always use it, and it's guaranteed to land on him. And it's pretty good, as you can see, quite spammable also. So don't sleep on this one. Really good for mix-ups. I like having it in low stance. You know, doesn't matter. But yeah, so Sword of Discernment is really good. Alright, the next skill, Morning Light. So, Morning Light, if you get knocked down... Actually, I don't think this guy can knock me down. Let's get the Yoki. Alright, okay, can do it. Come. He can definitely knock me down. He's just shy a little bit. Alright. Alright, is that not going? It is. Alright. Bam. Stand up like this. It's pretty strong, it's decent damage. If you get knocked down. Bam. Stand back up. It's pretty good. But that's how it is. It's an alright skill. Not much to say about it. It's more of a bonus. It's not essential to anything. But it's pretty good damage for what it is. Alright. And with that, let's move on to the sword key. You might think sword key is bad. Or you might think sword key is not very useful, but I will tell you, sword key is amazing. So, that's not sword key. That's not either. Actually don't have it assigned. Sword key. Why is it so good? So I'll start by saying that it's a guaranteed cast. Just like Sword of Discernment. Even if the enemy is guarding, you can just throw it around. You can just throw it out. And it's gonna work. It's pretty good key damage. It's the second best key damage option. The best one being the kick. So this is the second best key damage option. It's got a bit of lag at the end. So it's a bit clunky to use. But what is it the best use for? Is finishing off enemy's key. So let's say this guy is about to get his key broken. And like as you saw before, he was actually guarding. But bang, you can just break his guard like this. And you know, key damage is pretty good. If he's laying down, you can stand him up with this. Also, if you need to do that for some grapples or something. Sword key is super good. Somewhat spammable, like this, for good key damage. Impossible to interrupt, hits all around you. It's a really good skill. And if you're still missing a little bit of key damage after using it, then you can follow it up with this thing, whatever it's called. Let me check in a second. You can follow it up with sort of Celerity. So after casting 3 more strikes. Sort of Celerity has got a bit of lag at the end. So I'm not a huge fan of it. Only use it if you're sure that those 3 hits will, you know, deplete his key if you're just missing a little bit. But it's a nice aggressive option, nonetheless. And yeah, it is a modest amount of damage. It's pretty good for both human and yokai. Probably better for human. Best use for finishing off their key, as it's a guaranteed hit. Like I said, a really good move. Don't sleep on it. It's really good. Alright, let's talk about Swallow Swing now. So I got it assigned in low stance right now. So Swallow Swing at the end of light attack combo in whichever stance. Can be high stance also. You can do something like this. So it clashes with Morning Moon. In high stance, I guess you could say that. Yeah, I would probably use it in low stance for some evasive strategies. But you know, that's just what it is. It's pretty simple. You do it like this. If you wear light armor and you have Swallow Swing 2, you do a backflip. Otherwise, it's just a backstep like this. Solid skill. It deals a little bit more damage than a normal one. Let's fight a ninja maybe with it. So you know, keep attacking and then Swallow Swing. And what this skill is really good for, from my experience, is to use with a dash attack or a dodge attack. So let's talk about dodge attacks also. So for example, I kind of messed that up. So dodge attacks. Dodge, attack, 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 Swallow Swing, like this. So how dodge attacks work and dash attacks. Alright, so let's talk about those. You can perform a dash attack, which is from the running state, which is like this, or like this, or like this. Or there are dodge attacks, which is like this. for the short dodge, and like this for the long dodge. Right, so in mid stance you can have both. If you do a dodge into this, you get something like this. Or if you do the second dodge, then you're gonna get something like this. You can also use it after a back step from high stance like this, after a long dodge. So it's like a sizable dodge back and then attack forward, or with a short dodge, something like this. Dodge attacks are pretty good in general, and the best way to utilize them is in those very evasive scenarios, like, I don't know, Minamoto no Yorimitsu or bosses like that. So the best use for Swallow's Wing that I found is in conjunction with this. So what I was doing, so do a dodge attack, and after dodge you cannot combo instantly after a dodge attack. So I cannot do Swallow's Wing out of this, but I can, you know, keep doing light attacks and then do a Swallow's Wing. And after you do a dodge attack, you will continue the combo. So this counts as a first hit of a combo, so then you resume the combo from the second hit. Yeah, alright, so in any case, for the Swallow's Wing, this is pretty good for some evasive maneuvers and this kind of stuff. Yeah, that is the best use I found for it. There are also dash attacks, so the low stance dash attack is something like this. It really hits the enemies only if you're approaching them from the right side or from the left side. So like, if I run from this side, it's gonna miss, but if I run from this side, it's gonna hit. So it's kind of wacky of an attack. Not a huge fan of it. You can do something like this, which is pretty cool. By pressing like dodge and holding it at the right timing. You can also do it from mid stance. Like so. It's not that useful, but they're definitely there. Alright, so there are dodge attacks and dash attacks. And alright, let's move on to the Flowing Shadow now. So Flowing Shadow is on guard plus right click. There it is. Looks like this. This move is, well, I feel like it's a pretty popular move. It hits 3 times. You move around the enemy a little bit. This move doesn't have too much break. It doesn't have too much damage. It hits 3 times. Doesn't deal much key damage. The point of it is that you can dodge some abilities with it if you time it properly. But timing it can be a bit hard because there is a bit of luck at the start. So I am personally not a huge fan. In some maybe heavy armor builds, this skill definitely shines because it's a guaranteed cast, because you have super armor while casting it, so you can maybe kinda spam it. But from my experience, it's not very good. It's, you know, mediocre damage, doesn't have much break and doesn't have much key damage. So yeah, but it's pretty cool if you can time it. Can dodge some attacks and deal some damage at the same time. So that's Flowing Shadow. And so now let's move on to the shift skills. So Lai Quickdraw being the first one. All of the licensed skills. Alright, so let's start with the Lai Quickdraw. So shift your sword, dash forward and hit an enemy. Pretty good damaging skill. It's got a long animation, so it's pretty risky. Best use if you approach the enemy from behind, or you can space them out. Good damage, staggers enemies very strongly also. One thing to note about this is if you dash through an enemy with it, then you will actually get the damage, the backstab damage bonus, because that's how it works, that it kinda registers the attack when you're behind them. So you can dash past enemies. Come on. Wait. No, my skills are all messed up. I don't know what I'm doing. Alright. Can I deplete his key somehow? Please. Alright, so in any case you can dash past enemies with it. Alright, that did not... But you can, for a fact. If you stand right next to them, you can dash through them. So you can also evade some attacks with it. Yeah, it's a pretty good damage dealing skill. You will not get hit back because it staggers a lot, like I said. And that is it, pretty much what's going for it. What it's got going for it. Alright. So the next skill, right next to it, is Tiger Sprint. So Tiger Sprint is kind of like a weaker version of it. The difference is that it starts with a dash, or with, you know, starts from a run. So you can run a little bit and then unleash it. It really doesn't deal that much damage, so that's why I said it's a weaker version. The only thing that's good for is it's a decent way to start engage a combat with an enemy, because once he gets hit by this Tiger Sprint, he will get staggered for a pretty long time. There isn't much chance of him retaliating. Well, he's got heavy armor, so yeah, but most enemies will not retaliate. They will just get interrupted, so like you can kinda start combat with it. The damage is pretty bad, let's be honest. Not very good for that. But it's a decent gap closing option. It's an option, alright, it's an option. Next up, Night Train. Alright, so Night Train is the best DPS skill for the sword. Probably. Not much can beat it in terms of just raw DPS. Quite spammable. If you have this... actually you have to have it. The Lai Quickdraw 3. On key pulls you can just enter Light Stance and just keep spamming it. Really good for damage. And yeah, really the best option. Hits 4 times. Really good damage. Let's demonstrate. Alright, so Night Train is best used in combos, so it's the best DPS skill. One use I particularly like for it is to use it on enemies who are standing up. So let's say I hit this guy. Let's say I death blow him right now, even though I didn't. And then as he's standing up, you can do Night Train, and most of the time this Night Train will connect. So it's a decent option. Actually, let me get a sword so I can demonstrate this, like a low level sword, so he doesn't die instantly. And the rats. So let's say I do Izuna Drop now. I do a backstab, and then as he's standing up, I could still do Night Train, right? And it's really the best damage combo for human enemies. Most of the time this Night Train will hit them, they will not block it, and they will also not retaliate. So for that also it's really good. And there's one more thing about Night Train, or one tech which I found. So I was talking before about those dash attacks, and if you do a dash, so you can enter Light Stance from after a key pulse, after an attack, but you can also enter Light Stance on a key pulse after a dodge, because you can key pulse on a dodge also, right? So if you do something like this, a dashing attack into a key pulse dodge, then you can instantly enter a Light Stance out of that. So for example, that was kind of slow, but alright, that was better. Alright, like so. Timing is kind of precise on it, but you can approach enemies with it, and it's much faster than just running up to them, shifting your weapon and doing it like this. And also you can get this first hit in. Let me demonstrate. This is a bit of a, you know, it's a decent approach option. Or something like this. Wow, wow. Wow, wow. Spam Night Rain. Alright, really good. So, yeah, that's an option you have with Night Rain. This would not really work with Lai Quickdraw because the animation is too long, but it's an option you can approach enemies with. Yeah. So, and with that we got all of the skills, the base skills covered. So now let's move on to the hidden skills, which are the skills that drop from bosses. Starting with Dragon Fang. So this skill drops from Saito Yoshitatsu. Let's demonstrate. The thing that's going for it is, as you can see, bouncing off his guard. Can I get him out of here? Right. Bam! Stab him with a sword, keep it in, and you know, then pull it out. This move can give you a 6 or so anima from casting it, so it's really good for that. That's kind of the purpose of using it. It can also satisfy this bloodlust, this brutal kind of thirst for blood, because it's a very brutal animation. And yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool for that. However, it is overshadowed strongly by Izuna Drop, which is the best grapple by far. It's extremely overpowered. Izuna Drop is so good. So let's talk about Izuna Drop. Jump it a little bit. Drops from Ren Hayabusa. So why is Izuna Drop so good? Is in a normal grapple, if an enemy is out of key, you can either, you have two options. You can either do a grapple, or your second option would be to switch stances and hit them, knock them down, and then do a finishing blow, right? However, with Izuna Drop, you can do both. So let's take a look at what happens now. Let him use his key. Bang. And now Izuna Drop. And guess what? You can still death blow him. How crazy is that? Izuna Drop deals incredible damage by itself, and then it still allows you to death blow enemies. So it's not like a normal grapple game. I thought I had Shadow Flash here. Alright. But anyway, there is Heaven Flash. So, Izuna Drop is extremely overpowered. You can get this cool animation, big damage, and then still death blow. Or still finishing blow. You could even get Izuna Drop, hit them on the ground, and then finishing blow. If you really want to maximize your damage. So let me demonstrate that also. Izuna Drop, normal attack into this, into Night Rain, for example. Kinda crazy, if you ask me. Alright. Izuna Drop is super overpowered. You can also stand up enemies again, and just keep Izuna dropping them. Kinda like a zero key combo. It's possible. It's possible. Izuna Drop, extremely good. Extremely good. There it is. Alright, and now let's go back to the proper order. So the next thing that you can farm after Dragon Fang from the bosses is True and True, which drops from Asai Nagamasa. True and True is another really strong skill. I would call it quite overpowered. It's really spammable. It is a lot of damage for the kind of animation that it has and for kind of evasive nature of it. Because The charge time is not very long, as you can see. Charges quite quickly. And you can dodge instantly out of it, so you can just through and through, dodge back, through and through, dodge back. And you know where this is going. It's going exactly like this. So yeah, it's a really good approach option. You can surprise enemies with it from behind. Probably better to use something else for it, but it's an option. Good gap closer. Can dodge out of it for hard boss fights or some situations with multiple enemies. It's extremely good. You can just keep spamming this. They can't do anything to you really. Very overpowered, very spammable. Use with caution, but extremely worth farming also. Through and through is super good. And the damage is not bad at all. Like it's a really solid damage ability also. Alright, so that's through and through. The next skill which you can farm, I'm pretty sure, is Kurama Sword Dance. In order, so Kurama Sword Dance is on guard plus light attack. So let's put it here. And so Kurama Sword Dance. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Like this. 2 normal hits, then a kick for key damage, and then 2 more hits. So, things about this skill is it's really good into human enemies, it's quite spammable. Kick deals good key damage. You can just keep spamming it like this. This move has got really good tracking, so if the enemy dashes to the side, you will always hit them. So, let's see. If I start casting it forward, I can do, almost a 720. Like, just keep turning, right? Like, that's very valuable, because the enemies will just not escape it. So it's a surefire way to damage them if they're evasive. This skill is really the best used if you know that the kick will deplete their key. Or just spamming it also works pretty well. It doesn't have hyper armor, so if they hit you while you're casting, you will get interrupted. But otherwise, it's very viable. Most of it will miss if he's laying down, but it's a solid skill, it's a solid damage. I'm using the weak sword right now, so but good damage and good key damage. Really solid skill. Pretty long animation, so for some boss fights it's definitely too long, so you might need to cancel it out. I like to cancel it out right after the kick with some yokai ability or something, or burst counter out of it. But for those evasive bosses or for human enemies, really good. A bunch of damage, a bunch of key damage. Not bad for damage and not bad for key damage. It's just kinda long animation. Very viable skill. No hyper armor on it. That is Kurama Sword Dance. Alright. And so let's move on to the next skill, which is Severing Spin. Drops from Minamoto no Yorimitsu. Guard plus light attack. Alright. Once again, guard and light attack. I actually don't have it assigned here. We should keep it in high stance. Severing Spin. So, anime. That is. Alright. What can I say? It's pretty cool. Is it good? It hits 3 times. It's alright damage. I feel like this skill, for how cool it looks, I would say it's more of a bonus. I don't have a proper sword again. I'd switch it just to see the damage. So you have hyper armor while casting it. If you have enough toughness, you'll not be interrupted. It's probably better used against human enemies than yokai. Alright, if his attack is not that hard, then I will still not get interrupted. It's best used for spacing enemies out. So, you know, if I know that he's gonna come in, or I know that he's not gonna come in, but he's still in range, then it's pretty good. Even if he hits me, then I'm trading damage. It's alright damage, it's alright break against guarding enemies, but it would never be my first choice for a DPS skill. It really shines if you can hit more than one enemy with it, or if he's like standing up, I can probably throw it. It should connect. If you can get a feeling for the maximum range of it, then it's the most effective, definitely. It's a solid skill for a mix-up. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Alright, and so that's Severing Spin. Alright, and those are all the skills. There's actually one more skill, which is called Reverse Impact. I did not farm this skill, so I can't talk about that one, but from what I know, so the skill looks like this. You stab your sword into the ground, you pull it out with a bit of debris, so it's a short range skill. From what I know, it's pretty good for hitting breaking enemies. It's got some break to it. From what I know, I don't have it, I didn't farm it. It drops from Fujiwara no Chikata at the end of the mission with waves of enemies in like the last DLC. It clashes with Flowing Shadow and Sword Key, so it's on guard plus heavy. And yeah, and that's actually it. So those are all of the skills. Alright, so as a final thought, I also wanted to talk about what I think the sword is good for, or what is the identity of the weapon. So in this game there are physical damage weapons, or pure damage weapons, and key damage weapons. So sword would be an example of the pure damage weapon, because it just deals normal damage to the enemy, more than it does key damage. An example of a key damage weapon would be something like Tonfa, which deals mostly key damage. So I think sword is best used for evasion, for evasive playstyles. A sword really needs to wait for an opening, so against most human enemies, either you need to keep dodging and then go for your attack when you have a chance, or you parry them. There isn't really much else you can do. You cannot just steamroll through enemies and break them with the sword. So it's more of an evasive weapon, but once you get the opportunity, then it's definitely an above average DPS. So the main identity of the weapon is evasion and DPS, and it's quite lacking in the key damage department. Best option for key damage is the kick, second best option is the sword key, sword key, and the third option is this one, whatever it's called, which is the worst one probably, with kind of long animation. So evasive, normal damage and low key damage, that's the sword, and pretty flexible and versatile. Also, one more thing about the sword skills in general is that most of them have delay on them. So if you wanna use something like Lai Quickdraw, there's delay, right? If you wanna use Night Rain, there's delay. And many times, if you break a boss's key, then they will retaliate if you don't start attacking them instantly. So a soul core, which I really like, and it's definitely my favorite one to play with the sword, is a dweller. So you can spawn a dweller, and the good thing about the soul core, doesn't deal much damage by itself, but I think it's really good for the setups for the sword. So if I spawn a dweller, then I spawn him and I can start moving instantly. So while the dweller is kind of holding the enemy in place for me, I have the time to charge up my attacks. I can do the Lai Quickdraw, or I can do a Night Rain, or I could do, let's say, the Severing Spin. Also works with this really well. I wouldn't normally have time to cast it, but the dweller can buy me this time. So I feel like it synergizes super well with the sword skit, because all of the attacks, or most of them, have some kind of delay on them. You need to charge them up. So try out the dweller if you're playing with the sword. And so that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I will definitely make one more of those guides in the future. I'm planning a Tonfa playthrough, so probably a Tonfa guide will be next, eventually, somewhere in the future. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comments. I hope it was helpful, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.